The Allied invasion of Italy was the Allied amphibious landing on mainland Italy that took place on 3 September 1943 during the early stages of the Italian campaign of World War II. The operation was undertaken by General Sir Harold Alexander's 15th Army Group and followed the successful invasion of Sicily. The main invasion force landed around Salerno on 9 September on the western coast in Operation Avalanche, while two supporting operations took place in Calabria and Taranto. Background: Allied plan following the defeat of the Axis powers in North Africa in May 1943. There was disagreement between the Allies as to what the next step should be. The British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, in particular wanted to invade Italy, which in November 1942 he called the soft underbelly of the Axis. Popular support in Italy for the war was declining, and he believed an invasion would remove Italy, and thus the influence of Axis forces in the Mediterranean Sea, opening it to Allied traffic. This would reduce the amount of shipping capacity needed to supply Allied forces in the Middle East and Far East at a time when the disposal of Allied shipping capacity was in crisis and increase British and American supplies to the Soviet Union. In addition, it would tie down German forces. Joseph Stalin, the Soviet leader, had been pressing Churchill and Roosevelt to open a second front in Europe, which would lessen the German army's focus on the Eastern Front, where the bulk of its forces were fighting in the largest armed conflict in history. However, the U.S. Army Chief of Staff, George Marshall, and much of the American staff wanted to avoid operations that might delay an invasion of Europe, discussed and planned as early as 1942, which finally materialized as Operation Overlord in 1944. When it became clear that no cross-channel invasion of occupied France could be undertaken in 1943, it was agreed to invade Sicily, with no commitment made to any follow-up operations. However, both Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt, the President of the United States, accepted the necessity of Allied armies continuing to engage the Axis in the period after a successful campaign in Sicily and before the start of one in northwest Europe. The discussion continued through the Trident Conference in Washington in May, but it was not until late July, after the course of the Sicilian campaign had become clear and with the fall of Benito Mussolini, the Italian fascist leader, that the Joint Chiefs of Staff instructed General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander in the Mediterranean, to go ahead at the earliest possible date. Joint Allied Force Headquarters were operationally responsible for all Allied land forces in the Mediterranean theater, and it was they who planned and commanded the invasion of Sicily and the Italian mainland. The Allied invasion of Sicily in July 1943, codenamed Operation Husky, was highly successful, although many of the Axis forces managed to avoid capture and escape to the mainland. To the Axis, this was viewed as a success. More importantly, in late July a coup deposed Mussolini as head of the Italian government, which then began approaching the Allies to make peace. It was believed a quick invasion of Italy might hasten an Italian surrender and produce quick military victories over the German troops that could be trapped fighting in a hostile country. However, Italian resistance proved relatively strong, and fighting in Italy continued even after the fall of Berlin in April 1945. In addition, the invasion left the Allies in a position of supplying food and supplies to conquered territory, a burden which would otherwise have fallen on Germany. As well, Italy occupied by a hostile German army would have created additional problems for the German commander-in-chief, General Feldmarschall Albert Kesselring. Prior to Sicily, Allied plans envisioned crossing the Strait of Messina, a limited invasion in the insteppe area, and advancing up the toe of Italy, anticipating a defense by both German and Italian forces. The overthrowing of Mussolini and the fascist team made a more ambitious plan feasible, and the Allies decided to supplement the crossing of the British Eighth Army with a seizure of the port of Naples. They had a choice of two landing areas, one at the Volturno River basin and the other at Salerno, both at the range limits of Allied fighter planes based in Sicily. Salerno was chosen because it was closer to air bases, experienced better surf conditions for landing, allowed transport ships to anchor closer to the beaches, had narrower beaches for the rapid construction of exit roads, and had an excellent pre-existing road network behind the beaches. Operation Baytown was the preliminary step in the plan in which the British Eighth Army, under General Sir Bernard Montgomery, would depart from the port of Messina on Sicily, to cross the Straits of Messina and land near the tip of Calabria. On the 3rd of September 1943, the short distance from Sicily meant landing craft could launch from there directly, rather than be carried by ship. The British 5th Infantry Division of 13th Corps, under Lieutenant General Miles C. Dempsey, would land on the north side of the Etoile, while its 1st Canadian Infantry Division would land at Cape Spartivento on the south side. Montgomery was strongly opposed to Operation Baytown. He predicted it would be a waste of effort since it assumed the Germans would give battle in Calabria. If they failed to do so, the diversion would not work, and the only effect of the operation would be to place the Eighth Army 300 miles south of the main landing at Salerno. He was proved correct. After Operation Baytown, the British Eighth Army marched 300 miles north to the Salerno area against no opposition other than engineering obstacles. Plans for the use of airborne forces took several forms, all of which were cancelled. The initial plan to land glider-borne troops in the mountain passes of the Sorrento Peninsula above Salerno was abandoned the 12th of August. 6 days later it was replaced by Operation Giant, in which 2 regiments of the U.S. 82nd Airborne Division would seize and hold crossings over the Volturno River. This was at first expanded to include the entire division, including an amphibious landing by the 325th Glider Infantry Regiment, then deemed logistically unsupportable and reduced to a 2-battalion drop at Capua to block the highway there. The Italian surrender on the 3rd of September cancelled Operation Giant I and replaced it with Operation Giant II. A drop of the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment on Stazione di Ferrara and Cerveteri airfields 25 miles northwest of Rome, to aid Italian forces in saving Rome, possibly the most historically important city in the world, from German razing, a condition of the Italian armistice, because the distance from the Allied beachheads precluded any substantial Allied support of the airborne troops. Brigadier General Maxwell D. Taylor, the 82nd Airborne's Assistant Division Commander, was spirited into Rome to assess the willingness of Italian troops to cooperate with the Americans. Taylor's judgment was the operation would be a trap, and he advised cancellation, which occurred late on the afternoon of the 8th of September after pathfinders had already taken off aboard the troop carrier aircraft. The main landings were scheduled to take place on the 9th of September, during which the main force would land around Salerno on the western coast. It would consist of the U.S. Fifth Army under Lieutenant General Mark Clark, comprising the U.S. 6th Corps under Major General Ernest J. Dawley, the British 10th Corps under Lieutenant General Richard L. McCreery, with the 82nd Airborne in reserve, a total of 8 divisions and 2 brigade-sized units. Its primary objectives were to seize the port of Naples to ensure resupply, and to cut across to the east coast, trapping Axis troops further south. The Naval Task Force of warships, merchant ships and landing craft totaling 627 vessels came under the command of Vice Admiral Henry K. Hewitt. Part of Hewitt's command was Force V, which included 5 aircraft carriers to provide air cover for the landings. Cover for the task force was provided by Force H, a group of 4 British battleships and 2 fleet carriers with destroyers in support, which was directly subordinate to the C-in-C Mediterranean Admiral of the fleet Sir Andrew Cunningham. In the original planning, the great attraction of capturing the important port of Taranto in the heel of Italy had been evident, and an assault had been considered but rejected because of the very strong defences there. However, with the signing of the armistice with the Italians on the 3rd of September, the picture changed. It was decided to carry the British 1st Airborne Division to Taranto using British warships, seize the port and several nearby airfields, and follow up by shipping in Lieutenant General Charles Alfrey's British 5th Corps and a number of fighter squadrons. The Airborne Division, which was undergoing training exercises in 2 locations 400 miles apart, was ordered on the 4th of September to embark on the 8th of September. With such short notice to create plans, Operation Slapstick was soon nicknamed Operation Bedlam. The Avalanche plan was daring but flawed. The Fifth Army would be landing on a very broad 35 miles front, using only 3 assault divisions, and the 2 corps were widely separated, both in distance and by the Seal River. Clark initially provided no troops to cover the river, offering the Germans an easy route to attack, and only belatedly landed 2 battalions to protect it. Furthermore, the terrain was highly favorable to the defender. Planning for the Salerno phase was accomplished in only 45 days, rather than the months that might be expected. A U.S. Army Ranger force consisting of 3 U.S. Ranger battalions and 2 British Commando units, Commando and No. 41 Commando, was tasked with holding the mountain passes leading to Naples, but no plan existed for linking the Ranger force up with X-Corps follow-up units. Finally, although tactical surprise was unlikely, Clark ordered no naval preparatory bombardment and naval gunfire support take place, despite experience in the Pacific theater demonstrating it was necessary. On the German side, Albrecht von Kesselring lacked the strength to push the Salerno landing back, and was refused 2 panzer divisions from northern Italy to assist him. Operation Avalanche was planned under the name Top Hat and supported by a deception plan, Operation Boardman, a false threat of an Allied invasion of the Balkans. Axis defensive organization. In mid-August, the Germans had activated Army Group B under Erwin Rommel with responsibility for German troops in Italy as far south as Pisa. Army Command South under Albert Kesselring continued to be responsible for southern Italy, and the German High Command formed a new army headquarters to be Army Command South's main field formation. The new German 10th Army headquarters, commanded by Heinrich von Wertinghoff, was activated on the 22nd of August. The German 10th Army had 2 subordinate corps with a total of 6 divisions which were positioned to cover possible landing sites. Under Hermann Balck's 14th Panzer Corps was the Hermann Göring Panzer Division, 15th Panzer Grenadier Division and 16th Panzer Division, and under Trothair's 76th Panzer Corps was 26th Panzer Division, 29th Panzer Grenadier Division and 1st Parachute Division. Von Wertinghoff specifically positioned the 16th Panzer Division in the hills above the Salerno plain.